Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the 90s nostalgia podcast that always plays its cards right. I'm Alex Greenwood and I'm glad to say there'll be no jeopardy this evening because I'm joined as usual by my ever reliable co-host Stu Jocelyn. Stu, nice to see you nice. How you doing?
Hello Greenie, thanks for having me once again. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this one. It's a subject again that's been on the table for quite a while. And yeah, I've got a lot to say about this one, so really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. Nice. Some I almost said 80s then. That was an awful Freudian slip. It's because we were discussing Stu's 80s beer stein just before we went on air. That's 80s was in my mind. But there's some real 90s, sort of shiny 90s plastic television, I think, that we're going to be discussing today, because we are, of course, talking about game shows of the 90s, but we'll get to that later. Before we do, though, I should say that we are excited to say that today's episode has a joint sponsorship. I think this might be the first time we've had a joint sponsorship, actually, because we're sponsored by Littlewoods and Index. So you can use this discount code, which I'm going to give you in a second, in any Littlewoods or Index store. Simply find the item you wish to purchase from their catalogue, take it to the desk, and quote All Right 90s to get 10% off the purchase price. So thank you very much for this episode's sponsors, Littlewoods and Index.
Fantastic. I used to love catalogue code shopping. I don't know if Argos. I haven't been in a branch of Argos for a long time now, but I don't know if they still have the, as Bill Bailey would put it, the laminated book of dreams. I don't know if they still have that out front, and then you punch in the code and write it on the little bookmaker's slip, and then take it up to the counter.
There was a very fine.
Another thing that the internet's killed, possibly.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a very fine line between an Argos and a bookies, isn't there? In aesthetics, at least. But yeah, I haven't been in one for years either. But I've walked past the local one in the galleries in Bristol, and it looks sort of empty. It's weird. It almost looks like the Apple Store now. There's sort of just blank shelves and no furniture or anything. But yeah, so I think the internet has changed everything there. So
well, my local Argos closed down quite a while ago. We now only have one branch of Argos in Chippenham, which is inside the big Sainsbury's. So if you want to go to Argos, you got to go to Sainsbury's. But there's nothing like the disappointment of having some birthday money or some pocket money saved up, identifying what you're going to spend it on in the Argos catalogue, waiting until you get that shopping trip with your parents, running up there, you've memorised the code, you type it into the thing, and they haven't bloody got it. I've never ever got over that. I remember there was a green Nike watch that I wanted to spend my birthday money on, and for weeks and weeks I went back week after week and typed in the catalogue code, and they never ever had it. And,
that's awful.
Yeah, I've never quite got over that. But
I thought they got it in. They ordered it in if they didn't have it. Is that not how it works? It's just
if that was an option, either I didn't know about it or my parents didn't know about it and didn't want the fuss. And that's always likely. So I never got the childhood Nike watch of my dreams, but that's yet another scar from the 90s that will never heal, and has led me to present this podcast.
Well, there's another reason to get down to Littlewoods or Index anyway, isn't there? Because they won't let you down. They won't let you down, especially with 10% off. So thanks to those guys. Okay, I have some sort of follow-up content from the last episode we did. That was obviously on our dream car garage, and also before that we talked about the most 90s act of violence in our regular What's the Most 90s feature. Now, of course, James Miller, aka Fanman, came up as a result of Channel NEM's suggestion of who the most 90s paraglider was.
You haven't booked him. You haven't got him, have you? He's not about to come on the call now.
You may have noticed that someone is about to come into the call. It is. No. In fact, I shouldn't have joked about that, because the whole reason I'm bringing this up is we won't be able to get him on the pod because unfortunately he's no longer alive. The fan man. Because I was looking into his Wikipedia history, and he had quite the life, let's just say. I think I did refer to the fact that he had form with this sort of paragliding into sporting events or public places, and sort of making a bit of a nuisance of himself, because he had actually, as well as gate crashing the Riddick Bowe Evander Holyfield fight in Las Vegas, he also weirdly went from Las Vegas to Burden Park in Bolton England, where he interrupted a Bolton Wanderers Arsenal 4th round FA Cup tie. So a little bit more down market from Caesar's Palace there.
Yeah.
And he also
the Reebok, Burnden Park, the old ground. Amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know what that. I'd forgotten that that's where they played before Reebok. And also he was this is on February the 5th in '94, I think. He was witnessed by British police paragliding along the Mall before landing atop Buckingham Palace. He then removed his trousers, revealing that he was painted green from the waist down. He was arrested without incident and fined £200 and then again deported, because he'd already been deported after the Bolton Wanderers Arsenal event. But this time he was banned from re-entering the UK for life. So there you go. And then he had lots of up and downs after that, and sadly met an early demise in 2002, which is quite sad. So I'll let anyone read up about that if they want on Wikipedia. His name is James Miller, brackets parachutist on Wikipedia. But
R.I.P. fan man.
Yeah, very sad. I just wanted to make it clear that he will not be appearing on the podcast anytime soon as a result of that.
We're still working on Bjork though, right?
Yes, yeah. Okay. Discussions ongoing. And also part of what was the most 90s act of violence, your choice, of course, Stu, was the Eric Cantona kick at Selhurst Park in 95. Well, this may interest you, Stu, but my housemate was there. I lived with a person who was at that event, who was in the ground. He was a season ticket holder for Crystal Palace. He would have been 10 at the time, same age as me. And he was sat opposite. And I was asking him, this is Aaron, by the way. I was asking him what he can remember about it. And he says that he can't really separate what he remembers personally from what he has seen subsequently on TV, because he's seen it so many times, on TV afterwards. He can't really remember what is a real memory, but he says he definitely does remember it being exciting and knowing that Cantona was in the crowd. He doesn't really remember why he got sent off or anything, but he just remembers the uproar. But unfortunately, he doesn't remember any more details than that. Then I suppose what other details are there? But he was there.
Absolutely. Well, it's more than enough that we have somebody connected with the pod who was actually there. Yeah. What a story! I mean, you've got that for life. You were there at one of the most iconic sporting moments of the 90s. Dare I say it? One of the most iconic moments of football, British football at least. That's amazing. Yeah.
We're going to be doing our What's the Most 90s feature in a second. But just before that, also in the last episode, we were referring to a specific car. It was the choice that I didn't want in my garage, the Lotus Carlton. And I told a story about this 40 RA number-plated Vauxhall Carlton that had outrun the police after a spate of ram raiding. And it sort of gone missing. No one knew where it was. And Stu, I think you sort of in passing suggested they should go on the DVLA plate checker to see where it is. Standard. And then I thought, well, actually, I'm going to do that because why not? And I went on there. Lo and behold, 40 RA is registered to a green Vauxhall, registered in April 1992, and it was last taxed in October this year. It's coming up to its tax this month, because we're recording this in October, I should say. And so it lives, basically. And I did some more digging, and there's a whole sort of folklore around this car. Lots of rumours. There's sort of snapshots and these photos that have been snapped of it. And also, weirdly, briefly, the 40 RA plate was used on a Hyundai SUV.
Right. So
there are photos of this in like a supermarket car park somewhere. But it's now been put back on a Lotus Carlton, presumably the original one. And there's rumours that it's the original owner has bought it back or something. Basically, it seems like a very complicated story, and most people won't care about it. But just to say, the 40 RA Lotus Carlton apparently still lives. So if you know who owns it, you are the owner. Any connections, please get in touch and tell us what you know.
We want to know. I mean, listeners, you won't be able to see this, but Alex will. He will have seen that my wig flew off when he told me that car was still existing. Yeah. We are blowing the lid off of all of these big stories here, and it'll be all right in the 90s. Stick with us. We've got people who are in the ground at Selhurst Park when Eric Cantona performed his kung fu kick. We know where 40 RA is and that it still lives. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. How are we going to top this, actually? You should have saved some of this.
I should have saved some for next week, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, damn. Time for What's the Most 90s, and in these highly politicised times, I've gone for something current, and I'd like to ask Alex this week, who he thinks the most 90s politician is.
Yeah, very topical. Not that politics ever goes away, but it's very political at the moment. There's a lot of politics
Indeed
going on at the moment in the UK. But I have gone. No one really jumped out at me for this. A couple of people did, but I was quite adamant that I had to pick a New Labour politician, because even though New Labour only got in 97, towards the end of the decade, I still think they kind of typify the decade. So I've gone for them, and I picked fairly randomly Peter Mandelson, because I think he sort of sums up that new dawn of the New Labour Party. He was very sort of polished and businesslike and very distant from like the 80s and 70s Labour parties, which is the reason why I didn't go for John Prescott, because I thought he was maybe a little bit more kind of trade union in vibe. So I wanted that sort of polished, new look Labour politician, and that's why I've gone for Peter Mandelson. His nickname apparently was the Prince of Darkness because of his ruthlessness and his media savvy. And that's another thing I think about the New Labour cabinet of the time, and it was very media savvy and had this whole new look. So yeah, I'm not completely convinced about my choice, but that's who I've gone for. I've gone for Peter Mandelson, or Mandy as he was known. What about you?
Nice choice. Well, I have chosen Chat Show Charles Kennedy, who was the leader of the Liberal Democrats from 1999 to 2006. But obviously a member of Parliament for a long time before that, and sort of came to fame really in the 90s through his appearances on shows like Have I Got News for You, where he was always an amiable and willing guest. There was a famous clip of him on the show that they used a number of times where he's playing. He's got a 10-pin bowling set in the lounge of a retirement home, and all of the residents. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
All of the residents are there, and he bowls the ball and just completely misses all of the pins.
Yeah.
And it's a very slow bowl, and it just inches past the pins. It's very funny, and they used it a number of times. But I just think that he presented really a face of politics that isn't often seen, either in the 90s or now, is that more amiable side of the politics world. I think maybe in modern times, I think you know there are outliers, people like Jess Phillips, who I think is brilliant, and other politicians, Baroness Farsi, who do appear on the same sort of shows and present a warmer face, shall we say, of politics. But I think Charles Kennedy really was the first. And when he passed away a few years ago, sadly, Have I Got News for You actually paid tribute at the end of one of their episodes by doing a couple of minutes of his best bits from the show, which, to my knowledge, and I've watched the programme for a long time, I'm not sure they've ever done for anybody else who's been on the show, which just goes to show you how highly regarded he was by that particular programme. And yeah, I just think it's something that I miss, and it's something I'd like to see come back a little in the world of politics, although sadly, I think you'll agree it's probably swinging more the other way, with politicians appearing more aggressive than going the other way. And it's something I miss. So for that reason, I've chosen Charles Kennedy.
Yeah, very nice. I did wonder if you were going to go for Paddy Pants Down because of your sort of personal history with him. And
yes, well, that's been well covered.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I did have a think about John Major as well, just because he was obviously Prime Minister for the greatest part of the decade.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
he was. But no, in the end, I had to go for Charles.
Yeah, good choice.
We did have one piece of correspondence about this on Twitter, and Alex, I'll just ask you for your opinion on this, because I think this was a name that you were considering as well. The real Sir Malcolm Carrot, who might be a Tory politician himself, actually, the honourable member for Bournemouth or something. But he says it's got to be two Jags. Obviously, John Prescott, who we mentioned in the last episode with his encounter with Chumbawamba at the Brits.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's quite rare for someone to make two consecutive appearances in the discussions about what's the most 90s. So well done to two Jags for that. But yeah, I definitely toyed with him for this question, not in real life, because you would never. It's one politician you would never want to toy with. That left not. Jab. But yeah. I mean, it could have been him. I went for Mandelson in the end, but yeah, it could easily have been Prescott, and definitely great choice. So yeah.
There's another great "Have I Got News for You" clip of Prescott. I think he's being interviewed, and he thinks it's being recorded, but it's live. And he fluffs his answer to the first question, and then says, "Can we do that again? That was shit."
Yeah.
And then like, "We're live, Mr. Prescott."
Yeah.
Head in hands.
That's great. Time for the main topic at hand now, which is, of course, game shows of the 90s. We've each picked 3 each to talk about, as usual. Probably not so many personal recollections in this one as some previous episodes, but I am very interested to hear what, Stu, you've picked. I've got my 3 here. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, let's just get started. What was your first choice of the game show from the 90s you want to talk about?
Yeah, no personal memories in the manner that I never actually appeared on any of these programs, but I certainly enjoyed watching them. So the first one I'd like to talk about is Big Break, which ran from 1991 to 2002. Before we get into this, I just want to say I'm not here to examine Jim Davidson's career or outlook on life at all. I just want to talk about Big Break and examine this in isolation. So that's where we're going to go, and we'll leave all the other stuff behind. The first thing we have to say about Big Break itself is that clearly it's a rip-off of Bullseye, which was highly successful on ITV throughout the 80s.
Yeah.
Bullseye, I think, is probably my favourite quiz and game show of all time. But it's obviously very much associated with the 80s, and I didn't feel it was worthy of examination here. So we'll save it for it'll be excellent in the 80s when we get that going inevitably in the future. An iconic theme tune, I think you'll agree, one that everybody remembers and loves to this day. Hopefully you'll be able to drop a clip in here so I don't have to sing it for everyone.
It's only a game, so put up a real good fight. I'm gonna be snickering you tonight. I'm playing for my aim, so you better believe I'm right. I'm gonna be snickering you tonight.
And the show used to consist of 4 rounds. So first of all, there would be Red Hot, where a contestant would answer questions in order to gain the snooker player time on the table to pot as many red balls as they could. And then the 2 players with the highest amount of reds potted would then proceed into the next round. The loser of the 3 contestants in that round would go through to Virgo's trick shot, which was the best part of the show. I always loved the trick shots. And they used to even do trick shot specials. They realised this. They realised that this was the best part of the show. And I remember having a trick shot special on VHS, which I recorded off the TV, that I watched over and over again, just because it was absolutely brilliant. Then it would be Pocket Money, which was the round where the coloured balls on the table coincided with categories of question. And then you would go through to the final, where obviously they'd need to pot all the balls in order to win all the prizes on the colours. So, as I say, the idea is clearly taken from Bullseye, but still executed really well, I think, in terms of how the rounds are constructed and how the questions link to the coloured balls and everything else. I remember clearly, for some reason, and I don't know why, one episode where there was a wheelchair-bound contestant who got through to the final, and when they were running through the prizes, one of the prizes was a rowing machine, and they had a big laugh about that in the studio when they cut back.
Yeah.
that they'd made the mistake of offering a rowing machine as a prize to a wheelchair user. But yeah, it was a show that I always enjoyed on a Saturday evening, and yeah, it still pops up on. You can still get it on YouTube, as with most of these things, and I don't mind an episode of Big Break from time to time. I think there's even one hanging around on iPlayer. I think if you search for it, for some reason.
Really?
There's one episode of Big Break on iPlayer, so go and have a look at that. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Big Break to start off with.
Yeah, very 90s. I do remember watching it now and again. Never a program I would sort of sit down intentionally to watch, but it was that time of the evening where you'd inevitably be watching TV, and yeah, I definitely caught a few glimpses of it. Were the people playing the snooker, were they professionals? Was it just members of the public? Was it like the same as Bullseye, basically?
Yes, that's right. No, so there were 3 members of the public answering the questions, and then the snooker players were all professionals.
Oh, okay.
So there'd be some obviously who had retired and did just come and do this, but then there'd be some current. Like there's a very, very young Stephen Hendry appears early on in the series. Also, James Wattener from Thailand, who clearly hasn't got a clue what is going on throughout the entire show, and he's just been told, obviously, to play snooker and do this. So, it was always professional players, and as the show developed, they would have their own like walkout music. So Jimmy White used to come on to Jimmy Jimmy by the Undertones. And little things like that just made it even more fun. So yeah, a very, very popular program for 11 years until it was eventually rested. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Was that a pun when you said rested? Because there's
rest. Oh, that's no. It was no pun intended, but clearly I've made one. So no, we'll have that.
I imagine Jimmy White just would always choke at the end.
I know.
If you'll allow me a Jimmy White joke or a
got
joke
to the final 20 episodes in a row and just couldn't win it. Couldn't get over the line. Oh, we love you, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Come on.
He is one of my favourite snookerists. So we should say that. We do love you, Jim.
Right. Okay. My first choice is Supermarket Sweep, which originally ran from 1993 to 2001. So very similar actually to Big Break. Maybe it's just the golden era of game shows. I'm not sure. It was then revived in 2007, and then later again, like very recently, revived and hosted by Rylan Clark Neal in 2019. But it was then cancelled again, so that didn't last very long. It was originally a US game show, which I wasn't aware of until I looked this up. Originally airing in the 1960s, which was surprising, but only I think for one series, and then came back properly in the 90s, the same as the UK version. And so for anyone who doesn't know, the show was a combination of answering questions and dashing around this pretend supermarket. So it's quite sort of action based, lots of running around, and so there'd be various challenges. Like there'd be you'd answer a question, and the team that got it right would have to run around the supermarket and find a specific item, like a chicken leg or something. And then there'd be one where they'd have to compare the prices of different items. Like a jar of olives, is it more or less expensive than a tin of soup? Those sort of things. But then it was all really gearing up for the main event, which was the actual supermarket sweep itself, where the contestants would have accrued time through the challenges before, and they would use this time to run around the supermarket and gather as many items as they could. And when I was a kid, before I'd actually watched it, I assumed that they just kept what they grabbed. So it was like just going around the supermarket and taking the food you wanted. But of course, it wasn't that. It was the cash equivalent of whatever they picked up in the supermarket, as well as there being sort of inflatables and various other challenges they could do at the same time to get more money. And so, yeah, you would, whoever had the most items in terms of cash equivalent would win. I feel like there's a joke here to be made about the current cost of living crisis and how much something like, let's say, I mean, listeners, bear with me while I try and formulate a joke here. Something like
this is a live piece of art you're witnessing here.
You could make more money going on Supermarket Sweep now than you could on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. How about that? Something like that. Because of
gag. Strong gag.
Food prices are stratospheric at the moment. I'm going to carefully edit that so it sounds like I've just made a joke straight away. But
great.
We'll do that all in post.
There's no need for them to ever know. We're all right.
No. And yeah, I just quite like it because it's just sort of, I should have said at the start, really, I have a bit of a guilty pleasure for game shows. And it's a true guilty pleasure, the sort of thing I'd hide from people. Like, I'd quickly turn it back over if it was on, someone came in the room. Because there is something weirdly pointless about watching a quiz show from 20 years ago. I don't know, it just seems, there's no reason why it's more pointless than watching one that's new, but it just seems a little bit tragic. But I am a bit of a fan of them. And Supermarket Sweep is the sort that if it's on, I can't stop watching. And I think it's just the concept of it is sort of addictive to watch. And I think it's because it's something you would want to do yourself. And the idea of someone saying, right, you've got 3 minutes to go into the supermarket and grab as much as you can. It's something I think it shares with Finders Keepers, the ITV kids game show where you want to do it yourself. So I think that's why it's such a good game show concept and why it lasted for quite a long time. But yeah, I do have a couple of questions about it. Well, not questions really, but assumptions. So I assume that there are unwritten rules about how the sweep is conducted, because and I know a lot of other people think, why don't they just go to the CD rack and take all the CDs? Because back in the 90s, a CD would be worth, what, 12 quid, 13 quid? You fill up the whole rack.
I do think there was some sort of upper limit on high price items.
Yeah,
I think I've heard that mentioned in the commentary when watching old episodes.
So
they could only take like 3 full-size turkeys, for instance, or whatever. Yeah, in order to make it fair, definitely.
They did always take turkeys, didn't they? It was always turkeys, and ironing boards.
Yeah, which is silly if you think about it, because they're all very unwieldy, and you have to take the trolley straight back.
Yeah.
For a changeover.
Board.
Yeah. I mean, you tuck it under your arm, I suppose, and then I don't know. Does it have to be in the trolley? That's the thing.
Good question. Yeah. Well, there were some rules. So, because I also used to think, why don't they just stick their arm out and run along the aisle and just sweep everything into the trolley?
I think I know what you're going to say here.
Yeah, well, you're not allowed to break any items, and you're not allowed to leave anything on the floor. 25 quid fine for everything you break or drop. So you could lose yourself a lot of money, especially if it's like the pulses aisle and the beans. You're not getting a lot of money for those cans, but you're going to lose a lot if you drop them on the floor and leave them. So so that is why people didn't do that.
Or you run into, for instance, the loose Brussels sprouts by accident, come around the corner, crash a trolley into those. You are buggered.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why I've chosen it. I think it's just a good concept, good clean fun, and presented by one of the great game show presenters of our time in Dale Winton, sadly now departed, but a brilliant presenter in his day. And that's my first choice, Supermarket Sweep.
The late great Dale, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was one of the great weekday 9:25 game shows when there was a gap between GMTV and This Morning. There would be a program there. I want to mention a couple that I used to watch on school holiday in that slot later on in my honourable mentions list.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched an episode of Supermarket Sweep since my wife broke her leg. Right, this is unconnected to Supermarket Sweep in terms of the injury. But while she was bed and sofa bound, I was going to work in the morning, but getting her on the settee first, making sure that she was okay and had everything set up for the day before I left. And I would always obviously put the TV on, and on Challenge, it would be Supermarket Sweep in the morning, and I would put it on anyway, just while I was having breakfast, just for whatever. And one day, this is in like the middle of summer as well, there was one day that I forgot to fill her water jug before I left the house. And she tells a story that she fell asleep again after I left the flat, woke up again, and about 6 or 7 episodes of Supermarket Sweep had gone by because they were showing like 10 of them in a row. Yeah. She couldn't work out how long she'd been asleep for because of this. And then she realised that I hadn't left her with any liquids, and of course she couldn't carry the jug because she was on the crutches and everything. And it was a terrible day. So since then, I've sworn off Supermarket Sweep.
Oh dear.
It's just brings back bad memories of unintentional neglect of my nearest and dearest.
Yeah. Oh well, fair enough. I'm sorry I brought it up. No, I shouldn't have chosen it.
No. Of course it's your choice, and of course it deserves a place here at the table with the other programs we're going to talk about. Of course it does. This is my cross to bear.
Well, let's go on to your second choice then. Yes.
Shooting Stars. I want to talk about. The classic era ran from 1995 to 1997. Now, bizarrely, bearing in mind that I would have been 9 when the final series was broadcast, I was allowed to watch this.
That is surprising.
And it may have been repeats later on down the line. I'm not entirely sure, but I was allowed to watch this because, well, my parents loved it for a start. My dad still says that there's a particular episode of Shooting Stars which he says is one of the from the first minute to the last was one of the funniest things he's ever seen on television. And that particular episode always sticks in his mind. But I presume that they must have thought that most of the humour would go over my head and that I would just like the slapstick stuff, which I did, to be fair. There's lots of classic Vic and Bob sort of tropes in here. Obviously, the club singer, Vic rubbing his legs at the attractive female contestant who was always conveniently seated immediately to his right. One of my favourite clips, which me and my dad still talk about to this day, I don't know if you'll know this one, I hope you do, is the famous clip of Paul Shane performing "You Never Close Your Eyes." I think it was on Pebble Mill, but they've cut it up, and he's performing it, and at one point he just goes "baby, baby" in like a very pronounced staccato way.
Yeah.
Again, I hope you can find it and put it in here to do it justice instead of me doing it. But we still drop that in from time to time into conversation.
Let's have the clips round. First clip is for you, Team A. Lovely Mark with your rubbery ways. You never close anymore when I kiss your lip, baby, baby. A clip there of Paul Shane singing "Baby, Baby."
Plenty of. I mean, I've rewatched all these again recently. Again, they're all on YouTube, etc. They're all out there to enjoy again. There are some really stone cold classic '90s guests on the classic era of this program. So Wolf from Gladiators pops up in a rare non-Gladiators appearance. Incidentally, on Wolf from Gladiators, and this is a complete aside, did you know that he once turned down for Gillingham Reserves?
No, I didn't know that. When was that? Was that before? That must have been before Gladiators.
No. This is during Gladiators. He's
right.
I saw it came up online on something the other day, but he's credited that there's a like a newspaper photo of him actually playing in the game in the Gillingham kit, and then there's a picture of the team sheet which he is credited on as the Wolf at number 7.
Wow.
So it's definitely worth looking up if you haven't seen it already. Probably some of the people who listen to this pod are plugged into the same sorts of channels as I am and may have seen that already. But yeah, people like Dermot Morgan, obviously Father Ted, and Joe Guest, the probably would we say she's the most 90s glamour model? Are we going to put that one in the ledger as well?
Between her and Melinda Messenger.
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that's a discussion for another time. Actually, we'll have to come back to that one. And again, there are so many things that I've come away with from the program that still to this day, I still message my best friend Max occasionally with some true or false questions from Shooting Stars. One of my favourites is which of these is a fictional mountain? Is it Ben Nevis, Mont Blanc, or Mount Twatty Bollocks? And I quite often do that with him in the pub when I see him. So I had to mention Shooting Stars. When I watched it for the first time when I was very young, as I say, a lot of it would have gone over my head. But on rewatching it all again recently, it is a classic. It's one of these things that works sort of 70% of the time, and then there are quite a few things which by today's standards aren't great. But for on the whole, it's one of my favourite quiz and game shows of the 90s. That's for sure.
Yeah, very good choice. It's sort of peak Vic and Bob, but also peak absurdist 90s humour, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the things I watch if I'm feeling a bit down or need cheering up for some reason, I can always rely on the George compilation of his best songs on YouTube. For example, Baked Potato.
Yeah.
That's I think the best one, and Peanuts, of course, where Vic and Bob themselves in the background can't stop laughing, which makes it so much better.
It's about Peanuts.
Yeah. So yeah, brilliant choice. I'm glad we've got that. My second choice is, now that I think about it, completely different. It feels weird talking about this in the same episode now that I'm coming to it, but it's Ready Steady Cook, without a shred of.
We are a broad church here. We are a broad church. If
not a shred of absurdist humour in this at all, unfortunately. But Ready Steady Cook aired from 1994 to 2010. And then there was a recent comeback presented by Ryland Clark Neal in 2020, which was then cancelled after 2 series. I don't know if you're getting deja vu here from the previous one I talked about. And so from 94 to 2000, obviously encompassing all of the 90s, it was presented by Fern Britton, and then 2000 to 2010, Ainsley Herrick took over. And then the premise is very simple. 2 contestants would bring in their bag of ingredients. I think they would have had a budget of £5, unless it was one of the special episodes. There was like a bistro episode or something where they would get £7.50, and there was a budget one where they would only get £3.50. But normally it was £5, and then they would pick, say, 5 ingredients, bring them to their celebrity chef, and then the chefs had to prepare the meal. And so whoever prepared the best meal out of the 2 celebrity chefs would win the episode. And obviously there were certain ingredients that they were given for, just as a given, like pasta or eggs or flour or stuff like that. So the contestants wouldn't have to bring them. And then the winner would traditionally win a cash prize of £100, believe it or not. And then I read this on Wikipedia that apparently the runner-up used to receive a hamper, which would include a variety of items such as a set of knives, pasta and sauces, olive oil, and balsamic vinegar. Mm-hmm. But later, they received a ready steady cook mug due to budget restraints, which is a bit sad. Things are going bad with the finance department of ITV BBC, when they've had to just give out mugs as prizes instead. So yeah, the reason I picked it is because I think it's just, and much like with Supermarket Soup, I think it's a good premise that grabs you straight away. It's always what a good, long-lasting game show requires, I think, is a proper kernel of a good concept. It can't just, sometimes they're overworked, especially the daytime ones you get that sort of come and go these days, where there's nothing really to grab you there. It's the ones that have a proper good idea that really lasts, like Pointless Now or The Chase, something that will stick around. And I think this had that. And I'm surprised that it didn't, that the revival with Rylan didn't stick around, because I think it is a good concept. But there you go. Presumably, I could make another joke here about the cost of food because of the cost of living crisis. Maybe they would now need £50. I don't know. But make the joke yourself. So that's why I've chosen it. Stu, before we move on, I wanted to ask, how many of the original 12 celebrity chefs could you name?
Oh, right. Okay. Quizzes.
I will warn. I mean, there's a lot of people here I don't recognise the name of, but there are some that you will. So
okay, right. Brian Turner.
Yes.
Because I remember him from the famous outtake where they're piping some cream onto a cake or something, and it goes a bit wrong, and it ends up on both his and Fern Britton's face. Yeah, I thought so. So Brian Turner. Mm-hmm. Kevin Woodford.
Very good, yeah.
Who presented Can't Cook, Won't Cook after that, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ainsley Harriott, of course.
He's not on here, so he must have come a bit later. This might just be the first series, for all I know, but it just says the original 12.
Righto. I'll say Nick Nairn. Is he there?
Yeah, very good. Okay. Yeah.
Obviously, official 90s chef of the pod, Wazza.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's struggling. How many have I got? 4?
Yeah, actually, Wazza's not on here. He came a bit later. He was definitely on it, but he's not one of the original ones. So,
Leslie, somebody?
Yes, Leslie Waters.
Leslie Waters, right.
There's 2 active chefs today who are on here. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
One of whom is very big on TV.
Oh, come on, think, man, think. Not James Martin.
Yes, it is James Martin.
Oh, right, okay. I thought that would have been too early for him. Listen, I was struggling with Leslie Waters, so I think I should probably call an end there and ask you to put me out of my misery.
Okay, yeah. Ross Burden was the first one. Never heard of him. Gino DeCampo was the other one I thought you might get.
Oh, okay.
Gary Dawson, who I've never heard of.
No.
Paul Rankin, who I think I've heard of. I might be thinking of.
Paul Rankin, yeah.
Mm-hmm. James Tanner, Tony Tobin, and Phil Vickery was the other one, who is also... Is Phil Vickery the one who's married to Fern Britton? Is that right?
Yes, I think so. But is that the rugby player Phil Vickery or the chef Phil Vickery?
Oh, good question.
I mean, who knows? Are they the same person?
Maybe, yeah.
Is that his summer job?
Oh, no, I've just typed it into Wikipedia and it says Phil Vickery brackets rugby union, Phil Vickery brackets chef. So
okay, right.
Presumably it's a chef. Just checking. Spouse, married 2000. Oh, separated in 2020.
Oh.
They had a solid 2 decades together, but something changed in 2020.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was that Ready Steady Cook comeback.
Yes, it must have been. There must have been divided. Maybe he was invited and Fern didn't want him to take it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, ours is not to reason why. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Either that, it was just a classic COVID breakdown in a relationship.
Yeah, probably.
Plenty of them around. Anyway, yeah. So that was my second choice. Ready Steady Cook.
Excellent. I think I've told the story about the Take That concert on the VHS. Have I told that?
Yes, you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah.
So, what was it? Just remind us. It was you recorded one for yourself or something.
Yeah. So it was Take That live at Earl's Court '95, and it was on TV at Christmas. So I taped it and watched it over and over again. And then one day I put the tape in, and it was an episode of, and I remember this specifically. It was an episode of Celebrity Ready Steady Cook, with none other than everybody's favourite Scottish square-jawed Formula One driver, David Coulthard.
Oh, well, at least it was a good episode of Ready Steady Cook.
And I've never forgiven my dad for that. There's a lot of things I've never forgiven or forgotten about. Clearly, I need to let some of these things go. Maybe my life will improve a little bit. But
no, come on. If you let these things go, we wouldn't be doing the podcast. So. But we should definitely do a special episode where you just list the things you want to get off your chest.
Yeah. All of the times I was slighted in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what is your third choice then?
Okay, had to talk about this. I've gone for Robot Wars, 1998 to 2001 in the classic era. And this was part of, and I'm sure I've spoken about this before again, this was part of the big Friday night in TV-wise, late 90s. So there would always be a double of The Simpsons, BBC Two, 6 o'clock to 6:45. Robot Wars, 6:45 to 7:30. And then you would turn over to BBC One, probably for A Question of Sport.
And then that sounds right.
Yeah, and then after that there'd be sitcoms and things, and maybe a repeat of the odd repeat of Porridge or Blackadder or something like that as well.
Yeah.
But Robot Wars formed a big part of this. Everybody in the playground wanted to be on Robot Wars, and everybody said that their dad was building a robot so that they could go on Robot Wars, is what I remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to be on there. We're applying. Before we go any further, I have a little quiz for you.
Go on.
How many of the 6 house robots can you name from the original series of Robot Wars?
Oh, well, there's 6. I was thinking there 4. Well, I can name. Well, there was Sergeant Bash, who was my favourite. Yep. Mm-hmm. There was Matilda.
Yep.
There was Shunt.
Yep.
There was. God, there were more than that. Because Sir Killalot came along later, didn't he?
Yes, but I do have Sir Killalot down here. So
okay.
Yeah. So we'll include him.
And there were 2 more.
Yeah.
I
think one is a free moving robot and one is static, I would say, if that helps.
Oh right. No, I don't think I'm going to get them. Tell me.
Okay, so Dead Metal.
Dead Metal, yeah. Oh, I did know that.
And then the Sentinel as well, which I think was just a rotating arm with like a mace on it.
Okay.
Yeah, the robots had to dodge around. Big memories of this one. Jonathan Pierce on commentary, which was absolutely brilliant and a real departure, obviously from football commentary at the time. But his style of commentary, I think, really fitted Robot Wars very well. That overexcited. I should actually have played in last week the commentary of him doing the radio commentary on Capital Gold of the Eric Cantona Kung Fu.
Yeah, of course,
if you haven't heard that, that's brilliant as well.
Yeah.
Temperament, a man who has been quite rightly dismissed, a man who has now got, oh my goodness me, he just sticks, he's punched the man, Eric Cantona has jumped in and scissor kung fu kick a fan. Manchester United fans are coming across. I have never seen as disgraceful an incident as that in all my years in football. Eric Cantona.
Of the competing robots, my favourite was Razor, who was a champion, which had sort of pincers on the side. It was quite a small robot, but it had pincers on the sides.
Yeah.
Which are very good. Craig Charles and Philippa Forrester, the Dream presenting team, originally fronted by. Do you remember who was the host in the first series? And then Craig Charles took over.
Was it Clarkson?
It was Clarkson.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Craig Charles is definitely the classic era presenter.
Yeah.
And one of my favourite elements of this series were the people who inevitably would enter robots. Do you ever watch the Red Bull soapbox race on TV?
Occasionally,
when it comes up on like Dave or whatever,
yeah.
Right? And there'll be somebody at the top who has created a soapbox and they've used bicycle wheels, and they never learn.
No,
the bicycle wheels always buckle
yeah.
the first corner, right on that first berm. They all, and I always say, like, when will they learn? Why are they doing this to themselves?
Yeah.
I loved the robots where some facet of the robot that they built just left them completely open to being decimated. Like, so there's one I quite clearly remember called Brute, BROOT, which had wooden wheels, right? And you're putting it in this, robot pit, I'll call it, where there's flames and, things that are going to cut through and all sorts of, all sorts of dangerous stuff. And they go with a material like wood for the wheels, and they got knocked out, and they left even before the episode had finished. They went into like the engineering thing with Philippa, and they were like next to the table where they'd been before, and they just gone because they just got decimated.
Those wheels are plywood. Oh, and Matilda smells wood and goes in, and there's the immediate danger of having wooden wheels. A tired challenge from Brute.
I also remember there was another robot that did a bit better, but it was always covered in it was red fur with black spots.
I was going to say they came back for every series. Didn't they?
I don't remember the name, but that fur would always catch on fire as well.
But that was a bit of fun, wasn't it? They knew what they were doing. They that was intentional, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So it came back with Dara O'Brien a bit later on in recent years actually, but it's gone away again since. But Robot Wars definitely, I'd say, an aspirational program. This was the one that I watched in the 90s that I most wanted to be a part of, probably because I was a kid. But building a robot, taking it through, going up there and doing it was out of reach, but at the same time, an absolute dream. And I'm sure a lot of kids felt the same, that they would love to have got the opportunity to do that. So yeah, I had to put in Robot Wars. I know you're a big fan of this program as well.
Oh yeah, this was big. I mean, like I said, it started in '98, so I was 13. 12 actually, I think, because I was in year 7, and it was big. I remember being a member of the after school Robot Wars club. That was you would meet after school in the T9 computer room, headed by none other than Mr. Taylor Beasley, Stephen Taylor Beasley.
Brilliant. Legend.
Yeah.
Hi Steve, if you're listening.
Yeah, hello Steve. And I remember distinctly him being very clear for the first meeting we had, him saying like, we'll just pick whoever is the best, whoever does the best design. There's not going to be any sort of romance or any, beating about the bush or just being polite. It's going to be whoever's the best will make the team, and that's how it's going to work. And that was about the only meeting we ever had. Nothing happened. There was never any drive or any impotence. It was just like, we must have met maximum 3 times as a group, just jotted some vague ideas on paper, doodles, and that was it. So Stephen Taylor Beasley, Mr. Taylor Beasley, let us down a little bit there with his leadership, I'd say. Unless he went off, maybe him and a couple of students did really go for it, and they left us all in T9 computer room, and they were off doing it. But I never saw them on the program, so I don't think that did happen. But that shows just how into it I was. So,
do you remember a program which came along a little bit later called Techno Games, which was sort of the same thing? It was robots, but it was an Olympic style. They did like high jump, they did swimming, they did
kind of.
So my friend Phil Greenland, who's very technical minded, actually went and auditioned a swimming craft for that. And another legend of Corsham School, Howell Evans, accompanied him to Birmingham, where they went to trial this thing in the pool. Sadly, it didn't get through. But yeah, so maybe so one of my friends came a little bit closer to realizing some robotic TV dreams from Corsham School. But as far as I know, nobody from Corsham School yet has won any sort of robotics themed competition on TV. I think the closest we've come is Joe Suggs' recent House of Games victory.
I'm behind.
There's no robots. There's no robots involved in it. I'm sorry if I just spoiled that.
You spoiled that House of Games for me now.
Mate, I'm so sorry.
Can you remember the first robot to win the first series of Robot Wars?
I certainly can, mate. Roadblock.
Of course. Of course.
Hang on, how many can I get? Roadblock, Razor. Did Chaos 2 win it twice?
I think so, yeah. But who won it second? It wasn't Chaos 2. It was a yellow one.
Panic Attack?
Panic Attack. Yeah, that's it.
Roadblock, Panic Attack, Chaos 2, Razor, Tornado, Typhoon 2. Sorry, I've just remembered another one, which was Hypno Disc.
Yeah, I was going to say Hypno Disc earlier.
Which just had like a sanding wheel on the front, and that was it.
Yeah,
but it was brilliant, very effective. Unfortunately, it never won. But that was another memorable one. Occasionally,
you'd see like a flywheel or a circular saw would fly off and go sort of over the barriers, embed itself into the ceiling of the arena.
I hope all of these are on YouTube as well. This is another odyssey I've got to start.
Yeah.
Friend and frequent guest of the pod, Joe Barter, got in touch with me the other day to let me know that a YouTube user has uploaded every episode of Noel's House Party that was ever broadcast.
Oh, wow.
So that's something else now that needs to be investigated further. Shall we move on to your final choice before we get too bogged down?
Yeah, I just have noticed that Chaos 2 has its own Wikipedia entry, which I'm going to have to read later. But for now, I will move on to my third and final choice, which actually follows on very nicely from Robot Wars, because I've gone for Scrap Heap Challenge. And this actually launched in 1998, so the same year as Robot Wars. So it was obviously a good year for mechanical-based game shows. And then it finished in 2010, so a little bit more noughties than 90s, I recognise. But there you go. It started in the 90s. And it was originally hosted by Robert Llewellyn of Red Dwarf and Crichton fame, of course, for 10 of the 11th series. The 11th series was presented by Dick Strawbridge of Escape to the Chateau fame for any UK TV viewers, who was actually...
Was it rebooted in 2020 with Ryland Clark Neal at the helm?
And cancelled after two and a half series. No, not this one, but there is still time. The pilot was actually presented by Sally Gray. Do you remember Sally Gray?
I don't think I do, no.
She was a Scottish kids TV presenter who presented 50/50 on CBBC.
Right, now I know exactly who you mean.
Yes. Yeah. And also a program called It'll Never Work, which I had totally forgotten about until I saw that on Wikipedia researching this. So she did the pilot, but then it was Robert Llewellyn with a co-host. So Stu, can you name the two co-hosts of Scrap Heap Challenge?
I think the first one was one of the people who created it. Or sort of co-created it, but I can't remember. It's a lady, but I can't remember the name. And then I don't have a clue on the second, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. It was Kathy Rogers was the first one.
That's it.
For series 2, 3, and 4, and then Lisa Rogers, no relation, was the second co-presenter. Lisa Rogers is more famous. I think she was famous for doing other things as well. And both very good, effective co-presenters, I think. Along with Robert Llewellyn, I think, was a great presenter for it. The premise was that there would be two teams of 4. They would go into the scrapyard and then they would be tasked with building something using whatever they could scavenge from the scrapyard. So some examples were they had to build a catapult that was capable of firing a car. There was a bridging machine one, a jet car one. And so, they would have to just scrub around, find what they could and put them together. And then their machines would battle it out to be the most effective. I think I just think again it's a really good concept. It's sort of compelling, that idea. You kind of think, oh, what would I do? How would it work? What would really be in the scrapyard? Would it be possible? And I think there's just something very satisfying about watching people construct or fix things. And there's so many programs that feed off that. Isn't there? Like Wheeler Dealers is one of the most successful car shows. I think it is the most, or maybe the second most off the top of successful car show in the world. And that is just someone fixing up a car. And you've got stuff like Lego Masters, which I know you're a fan of, Stu.
Certainly.
It's just watching people, do stuff with their hands effectively. The Reassembler with James May.
Yeah, I was going to mention that if you didn't.
It's a very basic program, but it's compelling. So I think that's why it was a good program and that's why I picked it. I've always assumed that they must have set that scrapyard up quite carefully. Like they must have planted the key things around. I don't believe they really took just random stuff that happened to be there. Do you?
I suppose there must have been an element of stage management involved in order to make sure that they could actually build something that worked.
Yeah.
It strikes me as that would be the case.
It never culminated with one team building quite a successful catapult and another team just being like, Well, we've got this shopping trolley, and we've kind of attached it to this thing, and if you kind of push it, it kind of moves.
Yeah.
It was never like that. So, yeah, I'm sure they carefully stage managed it, but that's not to take anything away from the fun of watching it and the entertainment factor. And to me, it's classic Sunday late afternoon TV where you can't be bothered to get off the sofa and do anything else, and it's good enough to hold your attention. And I think sometimes that's all you need from a game show. So that's why I picked it. Just good, solid, satisfying fun.
Excellent, great choice. I'm afraid to say I've never seen an episode of Scrap Heap Challenge, but obviously I did do some research when you told me you'd picked it. What I do remember is it was another Channel 4 series. I don't know if you have any recollections of this, called Salvage Squad, which was sort of the same thing, but it was a team of expert mechanics and restorers who would go and help somebody who had a car or a Ferris wheel or a bridge or something that mechanical that they needed help with restoring. Hosted initially by Lee Hurst, who's another problematic character in the current era, and then hosted by Suggs. Actually, I might have that the other way around. I'm not sure. But that was another, and that was a series that I did watch, which was sort of along the same lines. But I think I might have missed the boat with Scrap Heap Challenge. If it was presented by Crichton and obviously is the original and best, then I should definitely have had a look into that instead. But no, great choice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, yeah, worth looking up and checking out if you get a chance. So that's all our choices then. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss? I think you do, don't you?
I've got a couple of honourable mentions, yeah. So firstly, I wanted to talk about, as I said, the 9:25 game show slot, which used to be very important to me, particularly in the school holidays when I was at primary school. And as I said, there would always be a game show in between the various morning TV programmes, one of which was Win, Lose or Draw, presented at various points by two of my favourite broadcasters, Danny Baker and Bob Mills, which I always loved. Essentially, it's Pictionary on the TV. Yeah. And it was that sort of big break element of you had a member of the public teamed up with two celebrities or actors or something along those lines. And I remember being very excited one Monday when I realised that all week on Win, Lose or Draw, Andrew Paul, who was the actor who played PC Dave Quinnen, who was my favourite character in the bill, was going to be on Win, Lose or Draw all week. And I remember being very excited when I knew that was going to happen. The other one, which I have less of a recollection of, but definitely a recollection of making my dad VHS it for me while I was at school, so I didn't miss it, is one called Runway, which was hosted by Richard Madeley and was based around travel.
Okay.
And all the questions were geography based, and then you would win a trip at the end if you went through. I don't have a lot to say about Runway, but I do remember being a fan of it when I was like 5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Yeah, I know, right? Precocious, yeah, obviously. Yeah. Bamboozle. Do you know what I mean when I say?
I can
Bamboozle?
picture the screen of it. Yeah.
So we're not talking TV game show or quiz show per se here, but this was a quiz that you could do yourself through the magic of teletext, hosted by Bamba Boozler. And then on a Sunday, his son, Buster Boozler, would host the kids' version of Bamboozle. So once a week, there'd be a kids' version, as I recall. And you played it with the fast text buttons on your remote. So 4 answers would come up to the question. You'd press red for one answer, green for another answer, yellow and blue, etc. And as I recall, I think there were 10 questions, and I think you had 3 lives. But many happy hours playing Bamboozle on teletext as well. And finally, I'd like to mention a show called Public Enemy Number 1. Now, does this mean anything to you?
The title sounds familiar, but it could be something else. I'm thinking. Okay, but tell me.
So this is from 1992. Celebrities predict what members of the public will do in a series of set-up pranks. So it's a tried and tested format. They've got there's cameras trained on members of the public. There's something going on, and then there's a panel of celebrities who guess what the try and guess how the public will react. this is regarded as the biggest TV entertainment flop of all time, according to our chosen resource for this episode, the UK Game Show's website, which is fantastic, and I highly recommend you to go and have a visit there. This lasted for 7 episodes in 1992, hosted by Bobby Davro. It's notable for one moment.
I know what the moment. I think I know what the moment is.
So there was some sort of end of series revenge stunt at the end of the first series, and Bobby Davro was placed in a set of stocks, which promptly then fell over and ended with him breaking his nose on the studio floor.
Yes.
Now, this was never broadcast, but it has been used in BBC safety videos, apparently, and I'm sure it's out there on YouTube, etc. But because I'm such an anxious man, I've never actually plucked up the courage to watch it because I know somebody's going to get injured and I don't like it.
Yeah, I've watched it numerous times because it is one of the most incredible bits of television you'll ever see. I do urge anyone who isn't too squeamish to go and check it out. Just type in Bobby Davro stocks accident or something like that. Maybe we'll put a link to it in the episode description, and everyone apart from the student can go and look at it. But it is, I can see why it was used for their health and safety videos ever since, because it's ill-judged, ill-advised, ill thought out, poorly conducted, and basically ends with Jim Bowen sort of panicking and just everything is done badly. And it's well worth watching if you can stomach it. But yes.
Is there blood?
No.
All right.
I think the injuries are far more internal. But
all right, okay. And this, I served as a physio for a non-league football team for a number of years, and this is the sort of thing that I can't watch. Fair enough. So this is why I've had to retire. Yeah. But yeah, no, those are my honourable mentions. Do you have any?
I thought it's worth sort of just giving a shout out to the really actiony ones like Crystal Maze and Fort Boyard, and Challenge Annika had a lot of running around, but I think that was mainly Annika Rice doing the running there. And then I think at the other end of the spectrum to those action ones, you've got the most to date, which I think is 15-1. That was sort of your pensioner special, lunchtime on Channel 4, I think, 15-1. Presented by a presenter I cannot remember the name of. What was his name?
William G. Stewart.
William G. Stewart, yeah.
Did he also come up with the format?
Quite possibly, yeah.
I think he invented it as well.
Yeah, it was good, simple quizzing. So yeah, that was good. That was all I had to mention really. And I kind of regret not talking about They Think It's All Over just because of it's interesting to look into where all those people have got to in their lives subsequent to that program.
We've already mentioned Lee Hurst once. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. And that I did watch that a lot as a teenager, so that would have been interesting. But we'll have to save it for another episode. We do have some correspondence on this, don't we, Stu? A little bit, I think.
We do. On Twitter, Request the 90s got in touch to say, who wants to be a millionaire? Was their favourite quiz show of the 90s. A massive step forward in terms of prize fund and production values. Got everything right from the music to the host. It's basically doubts the game shows. You can take a stab at any question, yet rarely be 100% sure of the answer. I'm surprised that we didn't mention Who Wants to Be a Millionaire until now, because it came along in the late 90s, but it really was a total game changer in terms of the quiz show. There'd been nothing like it, and it really was appointment viewing. For a couple of years at least, and I remember the buzz around the first millionaire, who was Judith Keppel, I think, who went on to become an egghead.
Yes.
But no, definitely thanks to Request the 90s for nominating that, because definitely worthy of a mention here.
Yeah, oh, huge! It was that figure of £1 million is just it did change everything. I do think it's the most boring thing to watch repeats of, though. Because, in contradiction to what I said earlier about quite liking old quiz shows that come up on Challenge TV or whatnot, something about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire I just find it's insufferably boring. Even the new ones now, I think it's got the big blockbuster prize, but so much of it is just waiting for people to answer a question or answering questions that are really easy. There's something about that I think. Yeah, I'm not a fan of so much anymore, but it was huge when it came out for sure. On our Instagram, we have heard from Tom23, which I believe is...
That's Tom Page. Yeah,
Tom Page.
My good friend and our new correspondent.
He has said, it's got to be Fort Boyard for me. The real tigers used to fascinate me. I can always remember Big Break being on a Saturday night too, and being amazed by the trick shots. So something he shares with you there, Stu.
Brilliant. Good man, Tom.
Yeah, Fort Boyard also presented at some point by Melinda Messenger, I believe, or she was there, wasn't she? Yeah. Wessex's finest glamour model. And then Ben Woodhouse, also on Instagram, says Bob Mills. This is because, Stu, you had posted on Instagram in preparation for this episode a picture of Bob Mills. And Ben Woodhouse says, Bob Mills, that face is such a blast from the past. I totally forgot he existed. And having just had a look, in a bizarre case of where are they now, he wrote the screenplay for the 2005 film Pierpoint. My mind was blown by that. I've seen Pierpoint. It's a really good film. It's like a completely very serious, high-end Timothy Spall film about Britain's last executioner. So the very last thing you'd expect someone like Bob Mills to be writing a screenplay for. Thank you, Ben Woodhouse, for pointing that out to us, because, totally... I would never have known otherwise. But
if we ever do a Forgotten TV Part 2, I'd love to talk about Bob Mills' series In Bed With Me Dinner, which was essentially the forerunner of Harry Hill's TV Burp, where he would get clips from different TV programs and play them back and commentate on them. And that ran in the early 90s, sort of late at night on ITV, and I've watched all of those as well, and very, very funny series. So I'd like to talk about that, and obviously Spender, which I missed out as well. So I've already got a list going for Forgotten TV Part 2.
Yeah, that's the thing about forgotten topics, isn't it? That you gradually remember them because they were forgotten.
Yeah.
So there'll be another one for sure at some point. But I think that about wraps us up for game shows, does it not?
Well, can I make a suggestion just before we finish?
Go on.
Because the pressure's killing me now. I am willing to watch live on the pod the clip of Bobby Davro in the stocks.
Okay, let's do it. This is great content.
And then we'll get some live reaction. Is this the sort of thing that we want?
This is gonzo podcasting. This is what we want. I'm going to type it in now so we can watch it exactly the same time.
Yeah, okay.
Type in Bobby Da, and you got first choice is Bobby Davro, second choice is Bobby Davro belly flop, and that's the one you get.
You cannot believe how I'm feeling right now.
Oh no, actually. It's actually, there's a different video where he does a belly flop. The Games 2003, Bobby Davro's belly flop, and it's the next one down in the stocks. Bobby Davro's faceplant almost killed him. It's the name of the video. 788,000 views on YouTube as it stands.
Oh my god!
I mean, yeah. Tell me when you're ready to play.
The things I do for this podcast. Okay, right. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, play.
Right, he's in the stocks. There's Jim Bowen. There's Lionel Blair. I think. Is that Keith Chegwin as well?
It's Cheggers on the right. Yeah. I mean, we're a real motley crew. They pulled his trousers down. They're now sort of dancing, singing.
Yeah.
Always look on the.
Oh, there he goes.
And this is why it's now used for health and safety videos at the BBC now. Because what do you do when someone has potentially got a life-threatening neck or spinal injury? You of course just try and drag them straight back up again while still in the stocks.
I like the sort of caption that whoever's posted this video has put up here with a series of bullet points. Last minute good idea. Pillory, which must mean the stocks, purchased by the prop buyer. Pillory assembled incorrectly. Pillory should have been designed as part of the overall production set.
Yeah.
And just as I was watching there, when he falls over, you just hear somebody go, "Oh, Bobby!"
Yeah, yeah. I think that's Cheggers. That if you listen again, that's Cheggers doing that.
Let me just play back because I feel a bit better about the whole thing now. So the point of impact here. Here we go. Right. Let's see.
Come on. Oh, Bobby! Oh, Jesus! Stop!
Jesus! Stop!
Oh, I like Lionel Blair sort of just stood there, kind of holds his finger up, like not quite knowing what to do.
So there's just while we finish here. Sorry, I know we're dragging on a bit this now. So somebody's commented under the YouTube to say this remains by some considerable distance the funniest thing Bobby Davro has ever done.
Yeah, very true.
There's also an excerpt here from Keith Chegwin's autobiography, which is quite long. So I won't read it out, but it looks like the studio floor was concrete. I can't tell you what it sounded like as he nosedived into the floor. He was conscious but delirious, zonked out, stunned. Oh dear, oh dear.
Yeah, apparently it was Keith Chegwin's worst day of his career, which is saying something. This is someone who did Naked Jungle later on. So.
But okay, right. I feel better now for having done that, and I hope that's provided some good content to end on.
That's good. I'm glad you thought to do that. There's another comment here. It says Davro was paralysed from the chest down by this accident, but later came back in Doctor Who as Bobby Davros.
Oh my God! All right, we have to finish there.
Right. Yeah, the comments are worth watching that video for, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it. We have talked for far longer than we were expecting, I think, on 90s game shows, but it just shows you how much great material there is out there and how much content there is. So we'll make no apologies for that. But yes, if you do have any thoughts on your favourite game shows of the 90s or any moments, anything that can top that Bobby Davro fail, then please do let us know on our usual channels. We do, of course, as mentioned in the last episode, have a new link where everything can be found, which is our link tree. So if you go to linktr.ee/allright90s podcast, that's where all our links are. Of course, we will put that in the episode description below, so you can click on that rather than trying to type it based on what I've just read out there, which is a bit clunky. And yeah, please do contact us because we would love to hear from you. And that's about it. We, again, as usual, tradition now, we don't know exactly what we're doing next time. Well, we're keeping you and ourselves on our toes by doing it on the fly. Mm-hmm. But I think it makes for great podcasting. So, you know.
Absolutely. Gonzo podcasting, as you said.
Yeah. But yeah, until 2 weeks from now, have a lovely couple of weeks. And yeah, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me. I'm just off to have a set of stocks properly made.
Goodbye.
See ya. The first thing I should say probably is that.
Can you pick it up?
There it goes. It's going to come through the window behind you in a minute.